Hey, shalom, 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 lakam, which is peace unto you all. Hayawam tawab la'atam, za'achikam yawam al-khadar, Charlotte, which is good day. This is your brother Yawam from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam, kayaham lakata shamayim kwara, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call layim la la, but now Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rachak, Odash, Wamashana, Lazakonim, Nawa. Wamalakim Sharakadar, which is our praises to our Father Yahweh, which means he exists, Bahasham, and the name Yahweh Shai delivers, and double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. This is Isaiah chapter 60, and we'll get verse 13, and it says, The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together. It says, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. All right, in which the place of the Lord's feet is talking about the earth. All right, because ultimately, due to the rulership of Esau, even the so-called white man, everything has been surviving in a very destructive type of a manner. When we look at creation, everything is supposed to thrive, and what gives it that the thriving or the vibration of abundance and operating in its true fashion, all right, is ultimately being in a state to where it's alive, all right, to where it's thriving, all right, and it's not just operating with like a band-aid on it. And what I mean by that is when we look at how Esau Edom has ultimately put the earth at a state of disorder, all right, everything is not in its proper place. And being that it's not in its proper place, all right, things aren't able to function optimally, all right, with the elect, all right, ruling the earth. All right, starting with the Lord Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, everything is going to be operating in a optimal state. All right, so reading this again, Isaiah 60 and verse 13, it says, The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together to beautify the place of my sanctuary. I will make the place of my feet glorious. Let's get this. This is Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 1. It says, Thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that ye build unto me, and where is the place of my rest? All right, so this scripture just proving that the place of the Lord's feet is talking about the earth, in which the earth is going to be renovated. It's going to be restored. All right, the true NWO. All right, because Esau's NWO is vanity. All right, and is worthless. You see, because going into the scriptures, it says, "Why do the heathen rage, and the people of the earth imagine a vain thing?" Roughly paraphrasing, So the NWO, so called, that the heathen have, that's ultimately vanity. All right, because Yasha Allah, we got next. All right, let's get this. Let's get let me see. We'll get Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 2. It says, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn." All right, so when the righteous are in authority, everybody's going to be rejoicing. You see, because the earth is going to be made glorious. It's going to be ran how it's actually supposed to be ran. All right, things are going to be able to thrive. All right, and be in their proper designation. All right, for example, all right, everything is mourning right now, you see, because Esau puts things and calls things out of their name, and then he puts it into a area where it shouldn't be, i.e., making sea creatures that are made to ultimately cleanse the earth. He'll make them into delicacies, i.e., crabs, shrimp, lobster, so on and so forth. He'll make them into delicacies when they supposed to be inside the water to cleanse the water. All right, and that's why a lot of sea and marine creatures are ultimately dying off. All right, because that's one way that the earth is mourning, or the people of the earth is mourning. Being that's taken out of what's known as the circle of life, so to speak. All right, Esau takes something from he'll take a animal population from one area of the earth. All right, where their ecosystem served them. He'll put them into a whole nother place. All right, and then now that animal's dying off, i.e., SeaWorld, having the, I believe they call them killer whales or orcas. They're not supposed to be in a zoo. They actually serve a purpose. All right, but due to his rulership, all right, that's one way that he ultimately is taking something out of his natural estate. And that's how in turn it's causing people to mourn, you see, because those creatures actually have a reasoning as to why they were placed where they was at. All right, so that's why the righteous have to be placed back into true rulership. Let's get that. This is Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 26. All right, and it says, It says, and I will restore thy judges as at the first, and thy counselors as at the beginning. Afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. All right, and the true judges, the rulers, all right, the Israelites, all right, starting with the Lord Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, the true state and order is being reestablished. All right, the house of David is being reestablished because that's going to be the new hegemony, the new rulership, and with that rulership and hegemony is going to come the law, statutes, and commandments. All right, whereas in this time right now, everything is thrown out of whack. All right, due to the rulership of Esau Edom. All right, as pursuant to Bosra, the 10th chapter, because the people take on the vibration of the ruler. All right, and being that who's in rulership, scriptures say that he don't have his mind after the Lord, so that's what we see throughout the world, all right, throughout society, throughout just different segments of life. All right, we see that it all hands point to, Esau Edom, as pursuant to Proverbs 29 and verse 2, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. All right, but when the wicked bears rule, the people mourn. Everybody is mourning, they're pointing the finger, hey, it's him, he's doing it, that's essentially the vibration and the how everybody is feeling amongst the planet Earth. All right, everybody's pointing fingers at the small hats. All right, so let's also get this, because the Earth does need new rulership. Let's get we'll get 2 Peter chapter 3, and we'll get verse 13, and we'll start at verse 10. It's in the subtitle. It says a new heaven and a new earth. It says, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. All right, talking about the ICBM nuclear missiles. It says the earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up, you see, because the earth has to be cleansed. All right. It says, seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness. All right, so you're going to have 2/3. They're going to be in the conversation of the wicked. They're going to be in the conversation of the conduct of those in society. All right, whereas the elect are ultimately going to have righteous conversation, holy conversation. All right, being in a state of being awake and sober. It says, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness? It says, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of the Most High. So the elect ultimately is looking and hasting, in a spirit of hasting, the Lord's return. All right, let's get this word for hasting. All right, it says G4692. It says to desire earnestly. It says to speed. It says urge diligently or earnestly, to await eagerly. All right, that's why the scriptures say ultimately the elect is in the elect's mindset is synonymous with the mindset of the earth. All right, because the earth is fighting back. It's fighting back against the rulership of Esau Edom. I'm gonna get a scripture and then come back to that. This is Romans chapter 8 and verse 20, verse 22, 24. No, 22, and it says, for we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. All right, it was another scripture right here, verse 19. Romans 8:19, it says, for the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of the Most High. All right, let me get this in the NLT, and it says, for all creation is waiting eagerly for that future day when the Most High will reveal who his children really are, because in that day, all right, ultimately it's going into the elect. All right, and when the elect ultimately is in rulership, all right, in glory under the Lord Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai. All right, that's synonymous for with everything being ran in its true and proper estate. All right, and which being that all creation is eagerly waiting for that future time. All right, that's also the same mindset that the elect have. Showing that creation in the elect ultimately is in a synonymous type of a state. All right, this truth is spreading across the four corners of the globe. All right, and the Lord ultimately is putting it into the mindset of the elect, and then also in the earth to come up against Esau Edom. All right, because being that this man's rulership has been found lacking righteousness. All right, ultimately the earth is ultimately in the mindset of understanding that true and righteous rulership is needed. So nevertheless, going back, we were at 2 Peter chapter 3 and we were at verse 12, I'm gonna read verse 12 again. It says, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of the Most High, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we according to his promise look for a new heavens and a new earth wherein wherein dwelleth righteousness. All right, and that's ultimately what we're seeking for. All right, we're earnestly and diligently seeking for a new heavens and a new earth. You see, because this current one is defiled. All right, it's defiled because of how everything has been ran. So the earth is in need of new rulership, and then it also needs a cleansing. All right, so I'm gonna get one more, and that'll be it. But this is Isaiah chapter 26. And we'll get verse 9. And it says, with my soul have I desired thee in the night, yet with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. For when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the Lord will, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. All right. And righteousness goes back to what's just, what's balanced. All right. It goes back to the Hebrew word tazadak. It says justice, rightness, righteousness, what is right or just or normal. It says rightness, justness of weights and measures, so ultimately, when the Lord's judgments are in the earth, all right, everything is gonna ultimately be acclimated with what's normal, what's right. All right, in this situation, how would this be handled? That's what will rectify the situation. All right. If basically what's right and what's normal, ultimately the problems and issues, they will rectify themselves. All right, it'll go back to what's ultimately going to troubleshoot itself. So it's going to operate in a sense of like a body, like how the human body ultimately has troubleshoots, and it's like a big computer. All right, because that's how it's supposed to be. Whereas now, when we look at in the sector of society, the true justice is never served. It's never true justice in the earth served, as far as how the animal kingdom, things are taken out of their true natural position, so it throws off the how something else operates. That's not right. That's not normal. That's not justice. All right, with the elect and rulership, everything is going to be it's going to troubleshoot itself. All right, and it's going to be normal, and it's going to be beautiful, so just wanted to go into that. Adoran Tazaza Banaya Palos, where that was a beautiful edification to the spirit. Wa Adoran Tazah Atam Yasha Wam Tawablu as well. You have a good day. Wa Shalom Lakam, which is peace to you all. Shalom, shalom.